South China Morning Post, 29th of September 2023, South China Sea, the US-China conflict and global conflict loom big. China is at war with all of its neighbors to achieve hegemony. After a flurry of high-level meetings between China, the US, and Asean to discuss concerns about the South China Sea, the dust is still settling. Are the conversations and the events that followed a sign of the status quo leaking or of a retreat into conflict? The competition between China and the United States for regional hegemony is the primary driver of the South China Sea disputes. At the same time, members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations may still have some agency if they can establish a distinct, familiar voice. And how dire are the circumstances? In July, China's President Xi Jinping warned U.S. statesman Henry Kissinger that the U.S.-China relationship was at a turning point. Some believe the U.S. is preparing for war with China based on its provocative military maneuvers. However, the South China Sea issues were not even mentioned in the joint statement released by the ASEAN summit organizers earlier this month in Jakarta. President Joko Widodo of host nation Indonesia urged attendees at the East Asia Summit to defuse tensions, especially those from China, the US, and other non-ASEAN partners. He emphasized that everyone in this room has the same responsibility not to create new tension, conflict, or wars. At the same time, we must ease tense situations, thaw frozen conditions, make space for communication, and reconcile existing disagreements. While in Jakarta, separate meetings were held in different configurations by representatives of China, the US, and Asian nations. Senior U.S. officials have also recently visited with their Chinese counterparts, including CIA Director Bill Burns, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Some claim that bilateral ties have improved only because U.S.-China meetings are happening at all. However, this is a desperate attempt to survive in the political maelstrom that threatens to engulf the area. Recent events seem to point toward the reverse of progress, or at the very least, a dangerously leaking status quo. These include tit-for-tat naval displays of force by China and the US. Even worse, China has escalated its actions, stepping up Coast Guard activity in South China Sea disputed areas. Early in August, the Philippines attempted to supply its troops on the disputed Second Thomas Shoal, but the Chinese Coast Guard stopped them with a water cannon. China has frequently cautioned the Philippines to avoid the shoal and controversially claims ownership based on historical records. The Chinese Coast Guard's move was risky because the United States, a military ally of the Philippines, had promised to support Philippine troops and government boats if attacked in the South China Sea. While Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia ships encircled Philippine boats early this month, an American surveillance aircraft watched another of the Philippines' resupply runs to the disputed shoal. "We are a U.S. Navy aircraft in the vicinity of Second Thomas Shoal observing all activities between Filipino and PRC Coast Guard vessels, including any unsafe or unprofessional actions," the plane announced over the radio. This did not, however, stop the hostile Chinese boats from acting aggressively. China must be concerned about the Philippines' decision to grant the U.S. military access to 4 more facilities earlier this year. This action appears to be a component of the U.S. containment strategy. In addition, other countries like Japan and Australia are considering joining the US and the Philippines in their combined patrols of the South China Sea. In August, however, Beijing increased military drills surrounding Taiwan in reaction to Vice President William Lai Ching-te of Taiwan visiting the US. Despite Beijing's strong protests, the US authorized an army sale to Taiwan the same month. These events occur in the context of ongoing U.S. intelligence operations contesting China's maritime claims and freedom of navigation operations in its near waters. In June, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin acknowledged as much, telling the Shangri-La Dialogue that China's alarming number of risky intercepts of U.S. and allied aircraft flying lawfully in international airspace will not discourage the U.S. and its allies. China then rejected the U.S. proposal to re-establish contact between their forces, demonstrating the depth of its discontent. Beijing created a distraction before the latest round of high-level negotiations could begin in Jakarta by releasing a new map with a 10-dash line that includes Taiwan and most of the South China Sea. The timing and boldness of the action infuriated competing claimants, and the map also prompted protests from the US and its allies, even though maps are generally rejected as evidence in arbitrations involving territory claims. Unsurprisingly, the sessions had little result. ASEAN is still far from reaching an agreement on a robust and legally binding code of conduct for the South China Sea. A fresh dispute has emerged in the last week about a floating barrier that China had erected at Scarborough Shoal and that the Philippines swiftly took down. Manila said the Chinese wall broke international law by preventing fishing vessels from passing through. A clash between the United States and China becomes more plausible when one considers the somewhat unpredictable behavior of China and its allies, like the Philippines, and partners, like North Korea and Pakistan. Potential hotspots like Scarborough Shoal, Taiwan, and the Second Thomas Shoal should be avoided by both with caution. However, something may badly go wrong against a belligerent China unless the two can agree to disagree and use military restraint.